All right. Good evening, guys. First episode ever of the Motley Crude podcast. How are you all feeling?
Good. It's nice to be here. Finally, we've been talking about this for a while, so it's nice to actually start getting into it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
like
doing
it.
great. I'm excited
Sorry,
to get started.
awesome. Like the amount of work that has to go into just setting this up is way more than I expected. But like, I'm super happy to be here now that it's all done. So, like we've talked about this a little bit. I think let's start by sort of giving our vision of how we see this podcast and sort of what we want to bring to the table. So yeah, anybody who wants to fucking launch into that right first there.
Well, I figure this whole thing came about was because at least the three of us, if not some of the other people in our like group and meta and stuff, we're always just constantly talking about the game, old world, and different things, different lists. Tournaments coming up. Why not turn that into a medium that like other people can listen to too? Because some of like our conversations, at least I feel that are like pretty constructive, I guess, or like interesting to me at least to like listen to and like see all you guys' different opinions on the game and tactics and things like that. So it'd be something cool to share to a wider audience.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Sorry, Ryan, did you want to go ahead there?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to expand on what Andrew was saying. Same general idea. Like, we are constantly discussing this. And I'm sure that there's some demographic out there that's interested in what we have to hear on that subject. And, as we've gone over a few times, um, there's a lot of talking about this game. But I think we also have a unique position as a group of people that actually play this game, like a disproportionately large amount.
Yeah,
So that's where I'm
I
at.
think you're on, man. Yeah, I think you're bang on there. And like on top of what you guys said from my perspective, I think we kind of bring a lot of skill sets to the table, which is probably interesting to that same demographic of like three people that you mentioned, in terms of like, we're playing a lot of games. We've got a pair of TOs here in like Andrew 100% organizing some events, and then you Ryan who's also organized events in the past. I haven't, but we're all coming at this from a competitive perspective also. Like we bring that to the table. We got some hobby chops also, so it's just like a cool mix of skills. I think that'll be interesting for people to listen to. And then also from my perspective, like I'd love this to be like a super positive hobby space to talk about the game and how it's evolving. And like as you've all mentioned, I think we've got some really good conversations going here that people will be just happy to listen to. So yeah, I should have said at the top, this is an old world podcast, Warhammer the Old World, for those who haven't caught on yet. And yeah, that's what we're looking at doing. So yeah, sorry, Andrew.
I didn't say anything, sorry.
Okay, cool. So yeah, before we kick off into like sort of the meat of this episode, which we're going to be talking about a big tournament that's happening here locally called Capital City Bloodbath (CCBB) Old World Tournament. Let's just talk about our three hosts and sort of what we're all about, and how we came into the hobby, how we made our way specifically to the Old World, and yeah, and kick off from there. So I don't know, Ryan, you wanna lead us off?
Sure. So I'm Ryan, as Kevin has pointed out, and I've been in tabletop games for 25 years now. Oddly, starting with like the old Clicks Mage Knight game. Uh,
Wow.
um, yeah, up through like third, fourth edition Warhammer 40K. I got really into Space Fleet combat games for years.
Nice.
I've been heavily involved, like outside of the Games Workshop sphere, I was heavily involved with Spartan Games and their products, Firestorm Armada, Dystopian Wars, Halo Fleet Battles, etc. And then I was also heavily involved in Flames of War and Team Yankee, put out by Battlefront, um, helping put together the national tournament for those games before I switched back to Games Workshop products. And ultimately, in terms of the rank and flank entity that is Warhammer the Old World. I actually never played Warhammer Fantasy Battles before. So January of this year was my first exposure to this specific milieu of gaming. But
Cool.
I am a long time familiar with Games Workshop, its outputs, and tabletop games across the spectrum.
Awesome. And how have you been sort of enjoying rank and flank games for the first time?
It's been an awesome and different challenge. I really enjoy the fact that the game is about maneuver insofar as it's about where and how you move your models and how that has reactions on the table.
Yeah.
While it's not necessarily as much about mobility, like it doesn't matter where you get to on the table, it matters what the effect your movement has on the enemy, which is very different than a lot of other gameplay that's derived from more modern warfare concepts.
That is a super interesting take right off the bat there, and I couldn't agree more with you. I think it's a kind of game that really sort of allows a lot of skill expression from the players, just because it's quite punishing, right, when you have to maneuver in that way. But yeah, no. Before we dive super deep into that rabbit hole, Andrew, like, what's your sort of wargaming history?
Uh, I started in wargaming, I think in like middle school. So, like that many years ago. Um, I forget what it was. I think I saw some kids on the bus with a white dwarf and they had like tokens in it for Epic Armageddon at the time. So instead
Nice.
of having to buy the models, they gave out like little paper tokens in one of the white dwarves. And I was like, what the hell is that crap? And so they got me into 40K and I did that mostly through like high school. And then in university, um, around the time 8th Ed was like just being announced, 8th Ed Warhammer Fantasy Battles was being announced. Like a really close buddy of mine who played Warhammer Fantasy like more than 40K, he was like, you should try this out, whatever. So I jumped in like day one, 8th Ed, and that basically like took over my life. That was the game I played the most. I had something like 6 armies for it by the time End Times came around. When I moved back to Ottawa in 2012, um, I met up with a few friends, Logan McLaren. If people listen to Can Hammer, they might know him from that. We started a YouTube channel for 8th Ed Fantasy, doing like battle reports and reviews and hobby content and all the fun stuff. That eventually became the Can Hammer YouTube channel as we like merged with that podcast. And then through there, we started Capital City Bloodbath, which is a big tournament here in Ottawa.
And
When
which
8th
we'll be
Ed,
talking about a ton later. Yeah.
yeah. So from there, when 8th Ed sort of got end times, I became a bit of a hobby nomad and just started playing like a ton of just random games. I jumped into War Machine, Batman Miniatures game, Necromunda when it released, which is my second love after Old World. Um, Rumble Slam, which is a weird like wrestling fantasy game. Like just any game I can get my hands on. Like I had a good like little circle of friends who also just kind of like played every game out there. So I was doing that for a long time. And then when Old World was close to being released, that's when I kind of like focused back in on trying to get an army for that. So now my main focus is Old World again.
Awesome. I like the sort of the dichotomy between Ryan, who's just starting off in rank and flanks despite like a fucking massive experience here, and then you, who's like a nice old world veteran, like Warhammer Fantasy Battles veteran. Um, yeah, on my end, so it's a bit of a similar story to you guys. I started, I guess, over 20 years ago now. In a like my younger brother, he got for his like 7-year-old birthday by his godfather like a box full of magazines, which is a terrible gift for a kid. But as I was sort of I was older than he was, and I went through the box and I found a white dwarf at the bottom of the box, and that sort of was like the eureka moment that set everything off, right? And we ended up playing like in third edition, just like we weren't really playing third edition 40k. We were kids and basically just screwing around with models, but that's when it all started. I dropped out of the hobby in high school, and then sort of circled back in university. Incidentally, I found out that Ryan and I were in the same wargaming club in university somehow, but never really met each other. So that's an interesting tidbit of podcast lore for everybody out there. And then after university, I guess I really dove in pretty hard about a dozen years ago there. Started with 40K. And then quickly shifted to 8th Ed Fantasy. Played like a zillion Night Goblins because those were the good old days of 100 model blocks, 100 model regiments or whatever. So that was a terrible first serious experience in terms of wargaming. And then just before Warhammer Fantasy Battles died, I shifted to collecting Chaos Dwarves, like the Forge World, Tamarcon era Chaos Dwarves. And I played those a ton into early AOS. And then, like, unlike you guys, I sort of stuck with GW products almost exclusively after the old world went bust the first time around. Played like AOS, 40K. And then in the last 2 years, I've really been diving into 30K. And then finally, since the old world has come out, I've been doing basically exclusively that. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. So yeah, like what have you guys been doing since the old world came out? Like in terms of what factions you're playing, like games, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I've been furiously painting Bretonians since I didn't have anything from when they came out, and being just a sucker for not doing anything the correct way, I promptly was like, you know what, we're gonna only play Bretonian Exiles, and then we're gonna do ridiculous things, like bring an army that consisted of like 95% peasants to a 5 round grand tournament,
Love it.
for which I got the wooden spoon, but also fundamentally decided who won that event by completely ruining the scores of other players throughout it.
Amazing.
But that's what I've been doing. It's just a lot of painting Bretonians.
Also, and like with one of the most difficult color schemes you can imagine.
Howling Griffins are great.
I bet you love them. Yeah. And then what about you, Andrew?
For me, so our local store, Red Dragon, had a bunch of old Dark Elf stuff. Guess what? There's Cities of Sigmar
Yeah.
currently. That was an army I always wanted to play back in 8th, and it was kind of like, oh, I'll get to it eventually. And then the game ended. I was like, well, I guess I didn't get to it. So when they released like the legacy factions, I was all in on Dark Elves. I'm like, finally, I'm going to make this army of my dreams. So I've been working on that. I do have grand plans to kind of resurrect some of my old armies from 8th Ed. So my thing was I had the 4 Chaos armies. So Warriors, Demons, Chaos Dwarves, and Beastmen. And they were all like Nurgle aligned. And like the way I painted them and hobbied them was like they were all one unified army. So like the basing scheme was the same. The overall like color structure was the same for the army. So I have plans to resurrect that kind of project and do it now that I have, an extra 10 years of hobby experience. I could probably paint it a little better at this point. I still have my old demons, so I've been rebasing them to old world, but yeah, but right now I've just been focusing on the dark elves.
Nice. I thought your Dark Elf army was what you played in 8th edition, so this is actually news to me that you just picked those guys up at the start of Old World.
No, they're a new army altogether, yeah.
Awesome. And then, so yeah, on my end, I've been playing a ton of games with my Chaos Dwarves exclusively. So they actually, when they announced the Old World, they started by telling us that the starting factions would be Tomb Kings and Bretonians. and they hadn't released the which factions would sort of line up for their Legacy or Renegade PDF factions. And like for the life of me, I never thought that they would bring back Chaos Dwarves. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm doing something else. I ended up buying it like a Bretonnian army and then never unboxing it because they announced Chaos Dwarves, and I was like, oh boy, they're coming out of the closet and we're going back in heavy on these guys. So just been painting those guys, and I've been adding to the to the army with models that didn't exist the last time I played them, or that didn't have like rules for them. So that's been great, and then playing just I think quite a few tournaments. RTTs, GT, the SBot, like the online tournament that's run by the Square Base podcast. So I've been doing all of that. And then like I'm kind of interested as I hear you guys sort of talk there, like what have you guys liked or loved about the game so far, like just in terms of its mechanics, or what's like really sunk its hooks into you from from an old world perspective?
For me, it's like a lot of like nostalgia for a game that I was, pretty deeply invested in. Like we had the podcast,
Yeah.
we were up on like all the rules. It's probably like 8th Ed Fantasy was the game that I knew the best, and probably competitive speaking was like the game I played the best. Maybe Batman is another contender because I did do a lot of events and go to a lot of events and um, more YouTube content for that as well. But like I think fantasy was the one like I tried the hardest, I guess, to be good at. And it's nice to kind of like slot back into that because even though it's a different edition, a lot of it's the same in a way.
Yeah,
I
there's
don't
a
know,
lot of callbacks in the rules for sure.
for sure. And like just the setting itself, like it's a great setting to that they've created for the old world, and it's nice to be able to like get back into some of the more like lore and fluff things as well because it is pretty like interesting. Some of the stories and things that they've
Yeah.
written for how the game plays.
Yeah, and it's like it's the same but with a different spin because of the different time period, which like
Yeah, 100%.
awesome. Yeah, and then this is like what about you, Ryan?
I mean, I think I covered it earlier. Just I really enjoy how much movement matters
Yeah.
in a way that isn't just how do I stand on this spot.
Yeah. Like
Um,
you're like deep into the mechanics of the thing. Like it's really appealing
that
to
that and I'm just a cavalry guy. Um, it's the thing.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think with how the rules are right now, most of us are becoming cavalry guys, but we can talk about that later. On my end, I think like everybody, there's a bit of nostalgia to it. Like I missed the setting. It's been I think like Creative Assembly and Warhammer, Total War Warhammer have been keeping it alive and fresh in our minds over all this time, and just getting back to it's great. I really like the RPG esque nature of the old world compared to like some of the more modern rule sets that Games Workshop produces. So like the tinkering, like do I want one guy with this weapon, and like which 4 magic items am I going to put on this you know war boss or whatever. Like I really enjoy that aspect, and I think I've discovered a more sort of competitive side to myself through this game, and like I really enjoy that. I think it's a punishing rule set, and it goes back to a lot of what you're talking about, Ryan, in terms of if you set up poorly, if you move poorly, like you're gonna do poorly in the game. And like it's a kind of a rule set I've found that you only really get one chance to do what you want to do, and then if you screw it up in movement, it's really hard to sort of walk back from and come back from. So I found that to be super super exciting and interesting. And then the community, like I mean, I fell in with a cool bunch of guys who love this and like have interesting things to say about it and set up events. So yeah, I mean that's obviously part of the equation for me too. Yeah. So sorry, did you have want to throw something in there?
So you
I'm good.
mentioned like events. I find it interesting how many of like the old scene people, at least in Ottawa, like where we're from, are coming back out of the woodwork with like their old armies and stuff. Like there are some new people like Ryan, but for the most part, like a lot of these people who, the events we've been running, the RTTs and stuff, like I recognize or know a lot of these people from back when we were playing eighth. So it's kind of cool to see like all these old hats come back out of the woodwork.
Yeah,
And
for sure. Oh,
I don't know like if that's a good or bad thing. Like maybe there's not a lot of like new traction for the game, but like at least locally, like it seems like we have a pretty healthy scene too, right?
yeah, I think so. But I think like we started off, it just gave the game a really good base from which to grow because you had all these people sort of show up immediately day one with ready armies, and then it kind of like sort of paved the way for newer members of the communities to join in. So I think it's been so far successful, and like what you're talking about in terms of people just coming back is something I've heard online in like the discourse around the game a lot. That something was missing in their wargaming lives, and now it's just back, and it's just been great. It's been great. Um, yeah. So okay. So I think like we've gone around the table here in pretty good detail about who we are and what we're doing. So yeah, shall we start talking about the main segment of the episode, which is CCBB, so Capital City Bloodbath. Big tournament that's coming up in the next week here for us locally, and which we're all involved with in some way, shape, or form. Ryan and I are both playing, and Andrew is the TO actually, who's setting this all up for us. So I think as the TO, like you should go first and sort of can you just run us through a bit of an event, like a history of the event and the Old World tournament specifically?
Yeah. So we started Capital City Bloodbath in 2014, I think, is what we were discussing. So there's three of us. Chris Haynes from Canhammer, me, and another local guy, Jason Sparks. We came together to start Capital City Bloodbath on a drive back from another event in the US, and we were talking about all um, sort of the things we enjoyed about the event. It was a 2-day GT. I wish I could remember the name of it,
Okay.
but it's not coming to me. Anyways, we were like saying like if we can run uh, the event of like our dreams with all like the stupidest amenities possible, what would it be? So it'd be like comfortable room, air conditioning, ample parking, catered meals, really nice terrain, robust prize support, like all just like the things you can ever want to be comfortable at an event. And we're like, well, why don't we just do that in Ottawa?
Mhm.
So we set up the first Capital City Bloodbath. Um, yeah, I think in 2014. It's been a long time, and we were kind of actually talking about that this year in like our Canhammer chat, trying to like recreate or refigure out the history of the event because it has been going so long, but we never really thought about it. Like every year is just like, okay, new year, new year.
Yeah.
So I think it was 2014. We started it at a hotel I was working at. I'm a chef, across the street from the current venue. It was a eighth ed fantasy event only. I think we had something like 36 players, which was like huge for Ottawa at the time. And then the following year, they end times eighth ed. So we switched over to 40K and ran that for the next um, however many years up until COVID. So what, 2015 to 2020?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds
And
right.
40K was our main focus for that, and it just kept growing bigger and bigger every year. And then we also had a smattering of sort of like we call it the side games. So like Lord of the Rings, we ran a few years. Batman was my thing, so I ran Batman there. Um, there was a X-wing group in Ottawa who also used the event space that we have now, and we kind of just ran the event as sort of like a general like GT with like a bunch of like smaller events there as well. It's grown exponentially every year. It's like been bigger, and then this year we're finally bringing back the old world, which is exciting. And we sold out about a month ago, so it should be good this weekend.
Yeah,
40 players. Unfortunately, there was a bit of mix-up with the hall this year, so we did have to downsize the 40K event because unfortunately we were double booked, and we had to take a smaller hall in the event space this time around, which isn't a bad thing, but we probably could have gone a little bit bigger this year, and for sure next year we'll be back in the main hall and be able to go like over 100 people for the 40K event.
nice. So like you ran an old world, like a Warhammer Fantasy Battles event once, and then it died on you, and then you're resurrecting it in like year 10, basically.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So a good friend of um, us, all of us, like here in the Motley Crude, Danny McDonald, he's been running 6 ed fantasy events locally for like as many years as I've known him. He did run 6 ed, I think 1 or 2 years at Capital City Bloodbath. So it's
Okay,
not this event this year isn't the first time Fantasy Battles has been back since the first event, but this will be like the first sort of like it being one of the major games at the event this year will be the first time.
nice, awesome. And it is one of the like the bigger games at the event, right? Like after 40K, probably.
Yeah, like 40K is like our main game, and then Old World is like the second main game.
Nice. This is all like super interesting. I've never been to CCBB specifically. I've always kind of wanted to go, but wasn't in the area locally where I could make it work. So this is super. This is super interesting. And then, like, I guess also from a TO perspective, like you've obviously learned like a ton about TOing this size of event for the last 10 years. Like, how do you prepare for running an event like this from sort of scratch? Because you hadn't run an Old World or Warhammer Fantasy Battles event in like 10 years. So, yeah, how does that sort of bit happen?
Um, this might be kind of like sacrilege to say, but as
That's
long
what
as
we're
you
here for, man. Sacrilegious
the fucking
statements.
the hot takes, you here for the hot
Yeah,
takes?
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Ultimately, the way events are run, it's kind of the same regardless of the system.
Okay,
At least that's my take on it. So like we've been running 40K, it's growing like huge. Like our last 40K event, I think was over 100 people. Um, it's basically like as long as like our players pack is concise, has all the relevant information the players need, like it's gonna kind of just run itself after we hit go on the first round. Yes, we'll have to answer some rules questions and whatever, but like as long as the players can play their games and figure things out, like it's basically just data entry at the end of the day, so it's not that bad. There is a lot of work like leading into it. Like this year, I went crazy. I've been building, we have 40 players, so I needed 20 tables of terrain for fantasy. I had maybe like 6 or 7 going into this. So I just finished this week actually, the last table. So we now have 20 complete tables with an equal amount of terrain on each, and like an even spread of each terrain
amazing.
type on every table. So like that's been crazy, but hopefully next year like I won't have to do that. Obviously, like maybe like 1 or 2 tables expanded a bit, or I'll start looking locally to get more terrain. But for the most part, like I've had a lot of help from Ryan, from Danny, like creating the pack and like discussing, especially Ryan with his background in running more like heavy competitive events. He's been a huge help, like helping create the pack and just making sure like everything's kind of clear for players and stuff as well. But for the most part, like once you get there, like all the work's done. It's not that bad.
Like, I think you're touching on something super interesting here in terms of tournament packs. As a, I guess, an end user of tournament packs, like I've always had a bunch of questions. I think both you and Ryan can sort of jump in on this, but like, how do you guys go about creating tournament packs, or like, what's the philosophy behind it, and how do you sort of uh, like prepare that? Yeah.
You want me to take that one, Andrew?
Yeah, go ahead.
So there's really 3 questions I've found across every game that needs to be answered. Like the first one's the obvious, just what time does everyone have to be, like, does
Yeah,
You
like the
need to
basic
improve the
details.
schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, just they need the basic, 5 W's of what they're doing, when, and all of that. Um, so they need that. The next thing they need is what they're going to be doing specifically in the event. As you get more competitive, or as events get larger in scale, it increasingly feels bad to lose because the TO was generating random missions and you just got boned.
Sure.
Or, you know, thinking back to 5th edition 40K where you could secure an objective and then on a roll of like a 1, the objective just kills you.
Okay.
Things like that. Working those things out of the game. Or so there's an element of both giving the players what they're going to be playing. So clearly stating we're going to be playing the following missions, which will be using these rules, and all of that. Specific to the old world, that was, the deliberate choice that Andrew made with input from Danny and I to play more missions than just open battle, uh,
Yeah.
as an example. But where that then leads you to is, okay, do we need to change these at all? And that led to the discussion that I'm sure you've heard in other places about how to fix meeting engagement,
For
um,
instance, yeah.
to make it playable in a tournament setting. Because having a mission where you have, was it like a roughly 50% chance of any individual unit in your army just not starting on the table, including miscellaneous individual characters not starting with the unit that they were intended to go with, um, creates feel bad moments where the dice have just lost the game for the player,
Yeah.
which isn't something that we need in a large competitive event.
Yeah, and
Um,
like way too early in the match for that to have happened. Like it's a dice game, but like I need to
yeah,
have more of an opportunity to win or lose.
yeah, like you don't want to lose at deployment. You can
Yeah.
lose in deployment, but you don't want to lose at deployment.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um, so so creative solutions come up, and that's when you know this leads down this rabbit hole of discussions of, well, what do you want the missions to do? And so, just to continue with the thought experiment of meeting engagement, there's two solutions available. You can either keep the intent of the mission, which is to create for the military interested people out there, a meeting engagement, two forces at column of march that engage each other in combat, um, or you eliminate the randomness, but also eliminate the flavor of the mission. So Andrew and company decided to go with the one that kept the flavor of the mission, but eliminated the randomness, and that's why Capital City Bloodbath will be using a version of the mission with a fixed portion of your army that needs to be kept in reserve for that game. It was kind of a bit rambly explanation of how we got to that, but also, that's that second question that players need answers. So we know what we're doing at the event, we know exactly what things we are playing at the event, and then the last thing everyone needs out of the event is the coordinating instructions, your scoring, clear, concise scoring criteria, articulating to people, we're going to be scoring your games using a points differential system. This is how you use it. This is what the differential is and what all the scoring bands are. Um, yeah, things like that. Defining what terrain is going to be used across all games. The goal in any reasonably large event is keep the to keep what's decided between players as the action between their armies and the two players commanding them, which means you need to keep as many variables consistent as possible. So every table should, within reason, be playing the terrain the same way. They should be playing the mission the same way, and the game should come down to tactical decisions made by both players. If you don't include that sort of information, you run the risk of the person with the larger personality steamrolls the other player into agreeing to play the terrain in a way that's disadvantageous to the more timid player, as an example. So
Yeah, that's
being
super
fair and
interesting.
upfront, so that everything is consistent across your event, is really what I think needs to be aimed for. And I think Andrew accomplished that in the final version of the terrain pack. But as we see, people will always find new and interesting things to be confused about. And so even on the day of, there's going to be questions that need answering to clarify how scoring happens, how certain other activities happen.
Yeah.
Andrew, anything else?
Yeah, for me too, like I wanted to, at least for me, play the game as pure as possible. So that means like less mucking about on my end on how I expect players to, say, create their lists, or um, going too deep in changing the way the game plays, like through like personal FAQs and stuff. I know we have modified missions, but that was in an attempt to remove sort of the RNG of how those missions play, as opposed to just saying like arbitrarily just deciding like, okay, we're gonna change this mission because I don't feel like I like the way that mission plays, right? Like it was more like I'd rather play as pure out of the book as possible, but remove like that RNG aspect, as Ryan said.
Yeah, and I think especially like early in the game's life cycle, having that is probably the right way to go. Just because like the meta hasn't formed yet entirely. Like books are still coming out quite often. I don't think it's like the game was broken or dead on arrival type situation. So yeah, I think like I agree with that philosophy. That seems to make a lot of sense. So no, that's all like super freaking yeah. Sorry, Andrew.
It also seemed like when the game first dropped, there was a lot of, I guess, like knee jerk reactions, or sort of pearl clutching to certain aspects of the game. I know like a big one, the easy example is Linehammer, and people were going out of their way to try to find solutions for that, when in reality, like once you hit the tabletop, like that was kind of like a non-issue to begin with. um so I feel like, before we start getting into like weird like WTC comps or whatever the hell existed back in 8th, that I forget, there were so many, like we should at least give the game a good like year and a half to like stew, and like
Yeah.
let the meta like sort of just even out and everyone kind of figure things out before we start mucking about with, more heavy rules changes. Then even like I'm not, we have rule of 3 of 6 because that's what was like suggested to me from multiple sources, not just Ryan and Danny, but like from
Yeah.
outside sources too. But like even I feel like, do we really need that? Like, is anyone taking like a million of like some rare choice or something? Like I don't even know if like that's an important thing to have.
Yeah.
But we're
And
using it this time around. But I don't know. Like I'd rather just play book, almost like as close to book as possible.
yeah, I think that that makes sense. And like, this is probably something we can bring to the discussion, like on this podcast, is all the, there's a lot of doom and gloom if you just read forums online about the game, but like, I don't think any of it has really materialized. Or I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'll read like articles or listen to podcasts, and I'm uh, where's this coming from? Because we haven't seen, like, Linehammer's a great example that sort of never really occurred. And then like the doom scary dragon big monster meta, which like yeah, they're powerful pieces, but they haven't wrecked the game or anything here, at least locally in our meta. So yeah, I like the real talk from the table sort of perspective that you're bringing to this.
Right, and like I don't claim to be the best player, so like I lose more games than I win. I'm also playing on paper like the worst army in the game, apparently, Dark Elves. But like a
Second
lot of,
worst.
Yeah, Skaven, have you heard about them?
oh sorry, but they're not real. I was told Skaven
Exactly,
aren't
they're not
real.
real. Yeah, yeah.
Um, so like I don't know. I always feel like my games, the ones that I lose, it's not because my army was not good or the pieces I had weren't good. It was like mistakes I made in the game. Like I can pinpoint like spots where I'm like, oh, that's the move that I pushed too hard and I shouldn't have. And that's probably the reason I lost. Like I never felt like, oh, my army just sucked and that's why I lost my game. So it's like, why would I change rules based on that just because I played poorly, right? So like I don't think we're at a point yet where we should be mucking about too much with rules.
100%. Like I couldn't agree more with everything you guys are saying there. And then like I guess in terms of tournament packs, the last thing I want to ask you both is you've done this a lot. And you kind of brought it up a little bit, Andrew, there when you talked about the rule of 3 and /6 that's been suggested by like elsewhere in the community. Like how much does sort of other like tournament packs and other sort of comp in parentheses in the broader community affect like how you're building your event, or do they not at all? I don't know.
Generally not at all, and unless it's an event I plan to go to or engage with, I don't even um, really pay too much attention. I guess like the big one would be SBot, but at the same time they're using our pack and then their own personal FAQ. So
Yeah, so
I
it's not
mean,
too
like
far apart. Yeah.
it's not too far apart, and like even their FAQ kind of just goes along with some common sense. Like I know there's a few things in there that I don't necessarily agree with. I'm not gonna like call them out or like do
Yeah,
it
yeah.
right now, but like that's how they want to do it. That's fine. But that's my choice if I want to like pull those aspects into events I
Sure.
run. Um, I know like the big one that gets a lot of flack is Nova Comp. Um, and if that's the way he wants to run his event, like that's not an event I want to play or go to, but like all the power to him. I know like I just saw an article where they're increasing to like 60 something players. So they're going to be a huge event regardless.
Hmm.
But like I kind of just, again, I'd rather play as close to book as possible.
Yeah, and I guess like that's interesting. And from my perspective, the something you touched on is like and the thought that's sort of generated here is like at the end of the day, if people are taking the time and are putting in the effort to run events, like let them run whatever they want, right? Because it's their baby, it's their creation. And then if you don't agree with it, then either don't go or whatever. But like I'm always, I guess, from the perspective of just a tournament player, going to respect sort of how the organizers envision their event and want to move forward with it. And yeah, and I guess you're right, like you shouldn't let yourself be influenced by the other tournaments out there because it is your thing. And then ultimately if you end up creating a thing that nobody else wants to play, then I guess that's on you. But like we should give you like the collective you, their tournament organizers, the space to sort of do that um
Right.
as a
And like
community.
there seemed to be like this weird, like unspoken etiquette thing where, if a group of individuals come up with rules changes or, you know, like the like personal FAQs or whatever or house rules, they kind of get laughed out of the room, but somehow TOs get like a pass. Like, I can decide to change a few things and I'll probably get less pushback than someone say wanting to house rule things on a grand scale, like in their home or at their like local game store, right? So it just seems kind of weird to me too. But like ultimately, if I'm changing the rules in a way that players aren't like, they're just not going to come to my event. So I'm going to
Exactly.
know if it's
Mhm.
like something they want or not.
And like on my end, like I keep abreast of what other events are doing and discussing and whatnot, just out of pure interest. And much like at work, I like to steal people's homework. So if some other event has a good idea, you know,
use it. Yeah.
I may find a way to incorporate it
Yeah.
in my suggestions. But at the same time, I also find a lot of feedback on what I don't want to see. Having lived through on the 40K side, the fourth and early fifth edition era of every single store was playing a different game because every single event organizer was using a different comp, a different rule set, a different mission set that they found online, and you just had this kind of super weirdly balkanized community
Hmm.
that made it very difficult for more nomadic people like myself who were not really devotees of any particular store to get games in when because even 20 years ago, people are always playing for the next event that they were interested in being involved in.
Yeah.
And it got quite cumbersome sometimes when, you had to use the old 40K issues, like you had people playing a Nova format, you had people playing an FLG format, you had people playing an ETC format, you had people playing a Swedish format, so on and so forth, um, where effectively these groups had diverged so much that you weren't even playing the same game
Yeah.
anymore. And that's where I very much agree with Andrew that, especially in the early stage of the game, to grow the game, to be inclusive, etc., it is the most accessible when it is as close to what we were provided in a published product. However, reasonable accommodation by event organizers to make the game playable in a competitive setting without those like feel bad the game wrecked your game moments.
Yeah.
Um, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that makes 100% like really solid sense in terms of staying close to the book, at least at least at the start, but in general, I think when you start to diverge so heavily, you just create basically parallel games, right? And you are not growing the overall broad community of the game because people sort of get you know uh, portioned off into whatever local flavor of the game they're playing. So yeah, that all makes a lot of sense to me. So I guess switching gears a little bit to something that's like slightly less dense on the rules pack portion, I'd like to talk about. So we're heading to a GT in the coming days. How do we, as players, I guess this is more of a Ryan and me thing right now, but like Andrew, you've obviously played in a lot of events. Like, how are we sort of how are we preparing for GTs, and how do we set up and sort of work our way to be able to do sort of semi well at those events? So let's start off like talking about sort of player perspective, Ryan, there with sort of what
Yeah.
we're bringing to CCBB, and let's talk about what we're bringing first.
Okay, so I'm bringing Bretonian exiles, as much cavalry as is physically possible,
or
within the
as
limits of
little
the
or as
rules.
little as possible. Yeah.
No, but in this time it is maximum. So
Okay.
it's a baron on a royal Pegasus, an outcast wizard and a damsel, uh, enabled by 2 lances of 6 knights of the realm, 2 groups of 6 mounted yeomen, 12 skirmishing peasant archers, 5 Pegasus Knights. They're going to get a cool Vanguard move, stuff like that. 2 units of
Nice.
5 Squires, 2 Border Princes Bombards, a unit of ambushing Border Princes Brigands with blunderbusses. I've said the letter B way too many times.
I'm really
And
interested to hear how the blunderbusses do like later
yeah,
on.
they do 10 D3 shots. That's what they do.
So
Um,
yeah, understood.
and then lastly, a unit of questing knights with the virtue of the impetuous knight. So they have a 20-inch threat range on their charges.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, it's really just full send the army. Um, because when I have to play 12 hours worth of games in one day, I don't want to think at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
end of round 4. So
that makes
that's
sense.
what I'm bringing. How about you, Kevin?
Nice. I'm surprising no one, at least locally. I'm bringing my Chaos Dwarves to the tournament. So I've been I guess experimenting with a lot of stuff for the last few months, and I've settled in on so basically double Iron Demon, Black Orc War Boss type of list with some. No war machines. I know Andrew hates that I don't bring war machines in my Chaos Dwarves, but
Sacrilege.
More
yeah,
Death Creatures.
exactly. More Destry. They're terrible. And I'm going to say that. I try them a ton, but yeah, level 4 caster in there, obviously, Sorcerer Prophet. I like the dwarves, actually. I've heard a lot of people are poo pooing them online, like the Infernal Guard. I think they're great. I got 2 units of those in there. And then a lot of Hobgoblin Wolf Riders. I think those are great too, especially the cons. So yeah, I mean, we'll go. I think in our next episode after the event, we'll really dive into details in terms of how we use our lists and all that kind of stuff. But like that's the broad strokes on my end. So yeah, and then what are like Ryan? Do you have any goals in mind for the event? Like something you'd like to achieve, or like a placing, or something? Like how do you see that?
So my goal is something I've held over from I used to drive from New Brunswick to Ottawa to go to Flames of War Nationals every year. Hopes in my
Yeah.
heart of winning and everything. And every year I would get to Ottawa and I would win 4 games and lose 2.
Okay.
Um, so my goal is just to maintain that record in 6-round tournaments of winning 4 games.
Four-two.
That's
That's
my
good.
yep.
That's very
You?
reasonable. I like it. I like it. Yeah, for me, so I first of all, saying this to the world is like, you're it's like when baseball when you show up and you point, to the far left field and you're like, I'm gonna hit a home run right now. You got to then commit and actually do it, right? So there's that bit, which is a little bit scary. Despite that, I'm not gonna cop out and say nothing there. So despite that, I've been thinking about it. I think I'd like to go top legacy/renegade faction in the event. I've been on a really good streak with my Chaos Dwarves. I think I'm undefeated in our 3 local RTTs, and I've winning 2 of them. And then I did pretty well also at CTC for the part where I was there. So, like, I think I've got a chance of doing this. So I'd like to go top legacy faction. We'll see how that pans out. So
Yeah. And I should also add, like, my confidence in being able to win 4 games is pretty good because in terms of tournament games that was not peasants,
yeah, yeah.
I've only lost to you.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, like, just I guess there's a little bit of a handicap with bringing just peasants, right? So, I mean, once
Yeah.
you've shed yourself of that, it helps your win rate probably.
Yes, all of my cavalry Bretonian games, I have only lost to your Chaos Dwarves.
And man, Bretonians are they are good. Like they are a hard matchup. Like I fought a few games against the Oops All Peg Knights list, the infamous Oops All Peg Knights, which is just brutal to play against. And then, I mean, even beyond that, like you guys have some really solid core. Like I love Knights of the Realm for what they cost, and then other stuff like your Exile Army, which I've played into quite often at this point. Like just the bombards and stuff. There's some great utility in there.
It's a better cannon. It's great.
I think it's possibly, we're here for hot takes, so that I think it's possibly the best cannon in the game.
It has its own. I actually didn't realize this. It didn't come up a lot, but it has its own misfire table that is less punishing than the normal black powder misfire table.
Like
So
so,
I'd actually been playing it worse the whole
yeah,
time.
like, fuck, that's amazing. Like, and Andrew, then you're wondering why I don't take any war machines with my chaos dwarves. Is give me cannons like that, and I'll be bringing them any day of the week. But
No, I
yeah,
just think you're doing it wrong.
exactly, exactly.
You
Um,
just gotta babysit them with like a lot of
You,
engineers around.
I
you got to
do.
babysit them with his state troops.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
exactly,
When I
exactly.
make
Yeah, the
my
thing
chaos
is,
dwarf army, I'll show you. I'll show you how it's done.
Exactly, the gun line, right? Just like
The gun
magma
line, yeah.
cannons and like mortars and yeah.
You do old school corner deployment, and you just make a fucking castle in the corner and just bomb the shit out of everything in front of you.
Sounds fun.
Then one unit gives ground and teleports through his army off the table.
Yeah, exactly. And then all the other guys break because they have to take panic tests, and then everybody's off. Well, I guess that doesn't happen very often in Chaos Dwarves. Like the leadership is really high, but still.
Yeah, if you're failing all your leadership tests with Chaos Dwarves, you deserve to like fall off the board.
Fair enough. That happens
Well,
very, very
nothing but boxcars.
Yeah,
exactly on like
I mean
12
it
units or
happens.
something.
But
Yeah. Okay, so so here's an interesting one that I don't hear a lot of people talk about online is sort of how do you prepare for a large event? So for us locally, CCBB is like sort of a highlight in the well, I guess the tournament year. I mean, it's pretty early because it's year one of the game, but still, it's a highlight. So like how are you guys approaching or I guess specifically Ryan right now and then me, like how are you approaching preparing for an event like that?
Uh, So, firstly, there's just trying to figure out how your army works, like what you want it to do.
Yeah.
Which basically over the course of the year, knowing CCBB, was going to happen within like the first couple months of the game existing, knowing I was building towards this. Um, Aside from my brief sojourn into peasantry, I I've been kind of deliberately bringing variations of what I could see being in my 2000 point army to all of our 1500 point RTTs that we've had over the last 7 months. Um,
Yeah.
so all of those games, I haven't really changed the archetype of that army a whole lot. So all I've been really doing is just fine tuning what works for me, what units I like including, what units I'm not getting value out of with my playstyle. Um, which then led to the soul crushing 6 weeks of iterative list design for the actual tournament itself because I have the inability to make a decision on what I want my army to be until I'm in that like crunch time zone right before the event.
Yeah, yeah.
So I spent a lot of time making army ideas, deleting them, making them again and again and again. But all of that activity is still processing in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, thinking
But yeah,
about
so
it and yeah.
exactly. So really, it was just the last 7 months have been trying to figure out what works for me in Bretonia, and then just putting as much of the things that work for me into the army in a way that makes sense. And because I'm a sucker for theme, there's also just certain amounts of like symmetry and whatnot that I can't prevent myself from taking.
Sure.
But that's all. You?
Yeah, that's like interesting because I thought I would be sort of heading off the beaten path there with the build up to the event, which was one of like the two big points I wanted to sort of bring to this. But like you've completely hit the nail on the head as far as I'm concerned. So I think when you're going to a larger event that you're working your way towards, like the build up is important. Um, so just like you, I've been using the RTTs that we've had locally over the past 2 or 3 months to sort of play test different parts of my list design, test different units, different combinations of items, all that kind of stuff, and seeing, again, exactly like you said, what I'm not getting any value out of or limited value or what's working better and what's not. And I've also been using like online games through like so the SBot was just for me anyways was prep for CCBB. So I used that to sort of confirm some of the things I tested in real life, and removed. That's when artillery had its like last glory day in my army because it simply was not working at the level of competitive play that I was sort of interested in being able to bring to the table at CCBB. And then the last thing in terms of build up, which I think is key and you touched on, Ryan, is like incremental changes, I think are kind of the key to success, because you've got to like if you radically change your list every time, it's like the good old scientific method, right? If you change everything, what variable made it better or worse, right? Like it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
So you've got to like go incrementally, and that's how I've been approaching it, like changing one unit, changing a few items here and there, type of situation between games. And I think that's worked well for me. And then like the second big thing is reps, but I think you've got to get, everybody says that, put the reps in, like, yes, of course playing games is never going to hurt, but I think it's helpful to like go beyond just playing games and then specifically practicing for the event. So the difference between we're doing a pickup 2,000 point game, like where both players may have completely different expectations and show up with completely different sort of things to the table, and then like actual, like you've talked this through and what you're going to do. So like a few examples of that I think could be helpful for people out there is so I've got a a buddy that I play games with online, who'll recognize himself if he listens to this one day. And he's really good about helping me practice for stuff, because he says, before we play, like, what kind of armies would you like to play against in your practice? Like, do you want me to bring A or B? And then he says, okay, what kind of list are you most concerned about? What do you want to try facing? Or and then which mission do you want to use from the pack of the event you're heading to? So whether that's CCBB or SBOT or whatever, and I found that to be way more helpful than just and I get that that's some people's only option is to just find a game, but yeah, I found that to be way more helpful than just showing up on a Wednesday night at our Red Dragon and then just getting the game I can get. And then another good example is if you've got multiple, that we've done locally, is if you've got multiple friends or that are heading to the same tournament that you are, like set up a little practice league, and that's something that I guess we can say now for my first time anyways, friend of the podcast, Danny, sort of organized for us, is like again a 4-person training league, which me and Ryan are both a part of, which is again part of that sort of dedicated practice where we're all running our tournament lists and with the tournament pack. So yeah, I guess Andrew, was that too much of an analytical take for you in terms of tournament prep, or does that all make sense?
I mean, it makes sense, but it seems very like more abstract. Like for me, like tournament prep is more like how would I get ready like the day of or like the day before. So, make sure you get a good night's sleep, make sure you're hydrated, make sure like double, triple check that you have all your army and your, accoutrements before playing the
Yeah.
game, like all packed and make sure you're ready to go. Um, so I remember back during like the 8th ed days, um, there was a sort of semi-local player. He lived in Vermont, but he'd always come up for like the big Canadian events in Quebec and Ontario. He drove all the way up to Quebec City for one of the big tournaments there, and he forgot his army in Vermont.
Oof.
So like just make sure you bring everything and like make sure you're ready to go like day of. Even if you have to make like a little sort of like checklist just to like be like, okay, got my army, had a good night's sleep, everything's packed, car's packed, ready to go if you're traveling, stuff like that. But yeah, like generally in speaking, if you're prepping for an event, don't do crazy changes to your list every like practice game.
Yeah.
Do those incremental changes as you said, because you won't know like is it the whole army or just like a few units that were the bad thing if you change your list drastically every game.
Yeah, I like the practical advice of make sure you bring your army with you, but like it's true, it makes sense. And like the water part, or like the staying hydrated bit, is something I've definitely run into in past events in my life, where I'm like trying to toe the line between I've had too much water to drink or whatever, and I have to go pee like every fucking half hour, and I haven't drank enough, and I'm like in a haze at the end of game 3, and I can't remember anything.
Yeah.
So
Um,
yeah, no,
especially with CCBB being 4 games in one day. Like it's gonna be that last game's gonna be a grind for a lot of people. It's just make sure you're hydrated, you had a good lunch, even if you have to bring like a protein bar or something, just kind of keep you going because it is gonna be a long day.
Yeah, for
Are you
sure. Like,
feeding us all pasta for lunch again?
I forget what we decided for the menu. I don't think it's gonna be pasta again. Though. Do like a little,
carbonara. Yeah.
yeah, a little
I
siesta
was
after lunch.
Yeah, I was in a coma during CCBB for 40K last year after lunch.
Yeah,
Uh,
pasta puts in and like something crazy. Nice. And so what made you sort of steer towards 4 games on day one rather than doing like the 3-3?
So we're only a 2-day event,
Yeah.
and a lot like I'd say like at least half of our attendees are out of towners. So
Okay.
either like from Quebec or like Toronto or even like Americans and stuff. So it's just to kind of like give them that it's so they're not getting home super late if they have to drive home.
Yeah, yeah. That makes
That
sense.
was kind of the idea. So like yeah, we'll go hard on Saturday, but then on Sunday, like hopefully we'll be done by like 4:35. So at least if you're driving like 4 or 5 hours, you're not getting home at like 1 or 2 in the morning and then having to go to work the next day on Monday. That was kind of like our thought process behind that.
That makes absolute sense. Yeah, for sure. So cool. So yeah, I think that's most of what like we wanted to cover today. So yeah, in terms of a first episode, I'm pretty happy with how this all has gone so far. And yeah, before signing off, there next episode, which will probably be like sort of a bi-weekly release schedule at the start, at least. Real life comes in the way all the time and stuff. But we'll be talking about be doing an event recap, like how did CCBB go? Did our wild projections of personal success pan out, or did I go 0-6? And just get dummied by everybody. So that'll be interesting, and then also getting your Andrew, your sort of takes as the TO in terms of how the whole event played out. Will be a good one. So yeah, anything you guys wanna throw out there before we close this up?
Not too much. Just I'm really excited for this weekend. It's been a lot of work, a lot of hype in our community, as well as myself just trying to hype up other people. So it's going to be cool to see sort of the fruits of all this labor like coming about.
Yeah, I think the hype is there, man. At least certainly in this podcast, but like in our local community and in the broader community, reaching out as you said, like into Quebec, into Toronto, into sort of northern, the northern states, the border of Canada. Like in the community, you've generated some interest. I mean, people like I saw a video yesterday, people reviewing our lists, across the pond there in the UK or whatever. So like it's generating interest. So that's all. So I think you
Well,
can, yeah, give yourself a tap on the back there.
even like Val from the Square Base podcast has been like our biggest fucking proponent for
cheerleader.
this.
Cheerleader, yeah.
Yeah, he's been talking about it since before we even announced we were doing it. So um, you know, that's a big thing for us to help get the word out, and it's pretty crazy that he's that excited about this event.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I definitely heard it from him before I heard it even from you that it was coming back. So yeah, good stuff there. What about you, Ryan? Anything on your end?
I'm just excited to get games in this weekend, and honestly, I'm actually pretty excited to like break down how it all played out over the weekend as well. So I'm very much actually looking forward to our next episode.
Yeah, me too, man. I don't usually do this because I've obviously never had a podcast before, but like I'm going to be taking notes and like thinking about, what went sideways in the games and what didn't, and just trying to bring some cool commentary, I guess, for the listeners there in the next episode. So yeah, all right. So I guess this is us signing off now. The first episode of Motley Crude. I hope the listeners out there have enjoyed it. Leave us some comments wherever you're listening. I think I can speak for the three of us there. We want to improve and make things interesting, and whatever ideas you have in terms of improvement or subjects or whatever, like, we're super open to. So we're waiting for your feedback, and this has been a blast, and I'm excited for the next episode. So thanks to the two of you for showing up.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right, good night. Motley Crude signing off.